The following is a transcription of over 100 handwritten pages of my mother's remembrances journaled in a notebook over a span of years after reaching the age of 88. The words and sentence structure for the most part remain as originally written, vividly projecting her personality, the flavor of the landscape, and her view of the times. Once upon a time, many long years ago in the year 1920, a baby girl was born in the Scott Valley town of Fort Jones, Siskiyou County, California. Her mother, Olive Annie Cuder Potter, age 37, and her father Robert William Potter, Bill, a versatile cement contractor builder, welcoming the beautiful baby addition. She had 4 siblings. Samuel, age 19, attending college in Long Beach, Della, who was taking teaching exams at a school in Chico, the following year to be renamed Chico State Teachers College, Charles Millard, age 15, 1/2, attending high school, and 7-year-old sister Alice Minerva going to grammar school. It was a time of the roaring 20s and the worst flu epidemic the world had ever known, and was also the first time women could vote in an election. It was also the start of Prohibition, women dresses that showed their knees, cutting their hair, and a time when everyone thought they couldn't live without cars, electricity, inside plumbing, radio, washing machines, refrigeration, silent movies, and a beginning of airmail and air travel. At the end of the 20s, came a downfall. The stock market crashed in October 1929 and the start of the Big Depression. Thus, a baby girl was born July 22, 1920, Betty Irene Potter was conveyed into a world of change and promises. This is her life.
I have only a few memories of Fort Jones. One of falling out of the smokehouse, and breaking my nose, my grandfather Cuder picking me up and holding me with great love. My sister Alice and her friend Norma, with me between them, the 3 of us running from a drunken Indian. I remember being in a car stuck in Chi Lane when my sister Della got it stuck in the ditch. I also remember a huge barn fire, Mother moving all our treasures because she thought our house would burn, and then the time playing barber with a boy and he cut off all my beautiful curls. We moved to Wairika into the Joe Miller's house in 1923, my brother Sam having returned home after working with Uncle Denham, and going to architectural school in Los Angeles. Dad was building the Wairika laundry, several houses, the Ford garage, and had to move the Call house while they were still living in it so he could build their new house. I used to go to the circus in Montague with the Call family every year. Our cousins, the Busbys, visited on their way to Alaska, and Aunt Olive also came to visit. While visiting, Eddie Peabody, the banjo king, stopped to see her. They played the banjo and guitar on the front porch to the neighbors' delight, Aunt Olive having accompanied him on the stage until she married Uncle Corey Dohans. Mrs. Short give me a toy Spitz puppy, he was my pride and joy. One day Mother started the old gas washing machine and so startled my puppy that he leaped off the back porch and hit the root cellar door and broke his neck. I was heartbroken and Grandpa Cuder helped me give him a grand funeral. When I was 4.5, Mother took me to a tea in honor of Mrs. Patsy Reed, who was with the Donner Party. My brother Pete told me, she ate people, and when I was introduced to her I was so frightened I screamed, "Don't eat me." Poor Mother was so embarrassed I was sent home as punishment, but Pete got a lecture. I had a lot of friends: Josephine Member, Mary Allen, Beatrice Parrott, and Gladys Gott. It was playing house with Gladys's that I broke all of my sister Alice's dishes. I had been forbidden to play with them as they were a complete set of china dishes only in miniature. I accidentally tipped over the board we were using as a table. I really deserved that punishment. We always had a large garden. When Alice and I wanted something special to buy, we would pick a vegetable to sell, and she was often upset because I always could sell mine to her customers before her. The worst memory when we lived in the Joe Miller house was getting a ham bone for Christmas. I had a bad habit of biting Alice. It was my defense. My mother kept telling me only dogs bit people. When Christmas came, I got a ham bone, no other presents till the next morning. Never again did I bite anyone. A very fond memory was that it was always my father who took care of us when we were sick. We had all the childhood sicknesses, croup, measles, chicken pox, even scarlet fever. I remember when I was 6, my grandfather Cuter, who always lived with us, died of a heart attack, having that very morning put up a swing for me. He was on the front porch when he suffered his attack. Della ran out in the road and flagged down a car with a couple of young men in it. They carried him into the house, but he died before the doctor could get there. Some of Dad's crew lived and boarded with us. My brother Sam's wife Bernice's brother Charlie Worth, Bobby Gray, who became head of Sontag Drug Stores, Jack Lyons, who was a great big man so tall that when he held me up I could reach our ceiling of 12 feet. It was while living at the Joe Miller's house that I nearly lost my leg. A ditch ran in back of Joe's house and in front of ours. He used it as a septic tank and we sometimes waded in it. A cut on my ankle became infected and gangrene started. The doctor said he would amputate my leg just below the knee. Della was teaching school in Quartz Valley when one of her students' grandmother, who was Indian, saw her crying and asked what the matter was. Della told her about me and she gave Della some salve to put on my leg. Mother put it on. I still remember the pain, but it got rid of all the infection and saved my leg. Ruth Brown would spend her summers in Wairika staying across the street. She was blind. She was about 13 years old when I first met her and she would read to me from her blind book for hours. My sister Della during the winter months would read to us every night, The 5 Little Peppers and How They Grew, Moby Dick, Anne of Green Gables, Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland and the Swiss Family Robinson. She also bought my book house collection and read from it. When I was 7, Della had a baby. My cousin Peg was born in the upstairs bedroom. What a treat! I was allowed to hold her, not like my brother Sam and Bernice's baby Jerry, who was born 6 months earlier, and I didn't get to see her until Christmas, although she was only 2 blocks away. I was spoiled. When my sister Alice was watching me, which was most of the time, and I didn't get my way, I would throw myself on the ground crying and screaming. That ended when I was about 5. One day when I did it in front of Mrs. Churchill's house, she came out, stood over me, telling me to get up and never do that again and learn to be a proper lady. By the way, she was old and looked to me like a witch. Later when I was confirmed in the Episcopal Church, she was my sponsor and stood up for me. In late 1927 we moved to the old coal house that Dad had moved across the road from Russell's gas station. The Perkins farm was next to the Russells, my dad buying it, moving their bunkhouse and main house to the back of the Main Street lot, then building our 5-bedroom home of cement block, which we called the Big House, where the Perkins house once stood. He worked on it in the winter of 1928 and into 29 while building 2 blocks of stores in Klamath Falls and the downtown area of Chiloquin, Oregon for the Indians. The memories of living in the coal house are great. I walked to school with B. Parrott, Alden James, Muggy Cloyd, Bob, and Mary Allen. Sometimes we roller skated up 3rd Street, crossing Minor Street and up 4th Street to school. In the summer we all played outside till dark. The first black person I ever saw was an old ex-servant of the Glovers. He was a retired slave who fought alongside Mr. Glover in the Civil War for the South. He lived in a small shack at the corner of Butte Street and Broadway. I passed his house on the way to school. When I was in the first grade, I was so scared of him that I generally ran past his house, but Mother found out and took me to meet him. She called him Mr. Cotton. He was gentle and so interesting that I would often stop to talk to him on my way home from school. My sister Alice had me fooled. She used to say she had magic powers. I believed her since one day while we were watching the smoke from a forest fire on the other side of Humbug Mountain, she said that when the 5 o'clock laundry whistle blew, the fire would come over the hill. Sure enough, just as the whistle blew, we saw the first tree on top of the mountain begin to burn. From then on I was a sucker. She would go into a trance while doing dishes and stop, and I would end up doing all the work. Never climb a chokecherry tree. They are very slender and the least bit of movement makes them bend and shake. I know that for a fact after spending a long afternoon in one. My sister Alice and her friend Irene Allen took Mary, Irene's sister, and I chokecherry picking. I, being the smallest, climbed the tree while they held it steady, and then they left me stuck in the tree while Alice and Irene went to the show and Mary went home. It was near supper time when Mother asked Alice where I was, sending her to get me, Alice threatening my life if I told Mother what had happened. All of us kids played in a big open field behind Parrots and the Russell house. There were 2 ditches and Greenhorn Creek that ran through it. The ditches once carried water to the mines at Hawkinsville. On the west side was a small knoll with several large oaks. That flat area became our battlefield, war against the Indians, a baseball or stickball field, a fort with trenches, castles made of rocks, and even Robin Hood was in a forest of trees on the knoll. Saturday movie matinees were played out, and the rest of the week, we built forts, made rubber band guns, bows and arrows, even rocket projectors. In the winter we had snowball fights and sledding down the knoll. We sold lemonade on hot days, put on plays, and played outside all summer long, run sheep run, dodgeball, sheep in my pen, hide and seek and kick the can. Our mothers would keep watch and corrected every one of us, but we soon learned with each mother what we could get away with. I used to go with my mother to visit her aunts in Southern California. We would go by train leaving from Montague, and Mother's cousin Clarence would pick us up in Los Angeles. I must have gone at least 4 times. I remember the first time staying with my Aunt Annie. She was married to a Penny, heir to Penny Copper and Iron, doing business as the Los Angeles Iron Works. She had a beautiful home opposite Mary Pickford's. The last time I saw her she was 98 and lived to be over 100. All of Mother's aunts lived to be in their 90s except her mother, who died giving birth to twin, born dead, in 1905, and Aunt Clara, the oldest, who died in 1932 in Medford, Oregon. Some summers, I was able to spend with my grandmother Potter and Aunt Lily Creason in Ashland. I was allowed to do most anything, go to the park, to the teacher's memorial, with grandma's boarders, as long as I was home before dark, and told them where I was going. I even did the same when they moved to Dunsmuir in 1928. I remember the Herbert Hoover, Al Smith 1928 election. One day while I was staying with Aunt Lily and Grandma in Dunsmuir, the Hoover train stopped. He was running for president and had 2 of his bodyguards with him, on his way to fish on the Klamath River, deciding to visit his cousin, my grandmother. He knocked and Grandmother opened the door. He asked if she knew who he was. She said yes, "You're Herbert, our stealing cousin," and shut the door. Poor Aunt Lily was so upset she cried all day. All Grandma would say is he took all the inheritance and put himself through Stanford. When we first moved into our big house, Alice had me so frightened at night that I would tie my big teddy bear to the bed with a large doll and sleep between them. She said Grandpa Cuter, who had died in 1927, would come at night and put his coat in our closet. My dad put a stop to her scaring me, but one black and windy night in October she locked me out on the back porch, and told me goblins and witches were coming to get me. The wind blowing between the house and garage would make a moaning sound. I was scared as I believed she had special powers, so scared I passed out and my dad found me. I was a tattletale this time. Every summer we would go to Ashland for the 4th of July. I have yet to see any fireworks that matched the ones at Lithia Park. We always brought home from Uncle Andrew's orchard apples, pears, apricots, peaches, and plums, enough fruit to can for the year. During the summer of 1929, Mother's cousin Clarence and his bride came to visit. They were on their way to Europe and had a brand new cord. Uncle Penny committed suicide when the stock market crashed and Aunt Annie lost millions, but moved to Pasadena, then to Baldwin Park, where she bought a store and 3 houses, Aunt Olive living in one of the houses. Uncle Corey was an alcoholic. I remember Aunt Olive being so happy he quit drinking. Instead he was taking 2 bottles of medicinal tonic a day, 60% alcohol. He later died of TB. I joined the Girl Scouts and we would go to Ashland for a week every year. As a Girl Scout I climbed Black Butte, also as high as Thumb Rock on Mount Shasta, but when I was 11 I didn't get to go. All the money I had saved for the trip went to buy Alice a wedding dress. That year I learned how and where babies came from. Mother gave me her medical book that showed all the female and male parts, telling me to read it. The pictures alone were education. What an education! B. Parrott, Alice Larson, and Jerry Saxton were soon educated by me. My good friends were well informed. As soon as I was old enough I had to watch my nieces and nephews. Jerry was 6, Peggy 6.5, Bobby 5.5, and Bud 8 years younger than me. The only time my father ever threatened to spank me was when I was watching them. He had a big long work table, standing about 3 feet off the ground, and I had built a playhouse on it using a ladder to get up on it. I wouldn't let them play on it. I was afraid they might fall, so they went crying to my dad. He sent me inside promising to spank me for being selfish, and I locked myself in my bedroom, and when he found out why I wouldn't let the little ones in my playhouse, he came to the door to apologize, but I didn't stop crying. After he brought me some ice cream, I accepted his apology. It was a real hurt to think he thought I was selfish, for to me, my father was everything.